The sword is often seen as the emblem of medieval warfare, elegant, deadly, and almost mythic in its symbolism. Yet what most people do not realize is that the process of creating a sword was rarely swift, rarely glamorous, and almost always uncertain. Medieval swords were not simply forged. They were painstakingly crafted over weeks or even months, subject to the skill of the smith, the quality of the metal, and the pressures of the marketplace or wartime demand. Many swords failed before they ever left the forge. They cracked, bent, or broke in testing. Some were nearly useless in battle, while others became family heirlooms for generations. This harsh reality is often overlooked in popular depictions of knights and duels, yet it fundamentally shaped the way medieval societies fought, trained, and survived. You know, understanding sword-making is not just about metallurgy. It's a window into the endurance, decision-making, and resource management that really defined life and death in medieval Europe. The foundation of every sword? Well, it was the quality of iron and steel available at the time. Medieval smiths did not have uniform steel. The transition from the early iron of the 9th century to the high carbon steels of the 14th century was, honestly, uneven and regionally dependent. Iron itself was smelted from bogs, ores, and primitive furnaces, producing blooms that were far from homogeneous. A smith's first task was to recognize impurities in the metal, which could render a blade brittle or soft. This required both an experienced eye and a practiced hand. Many early blades were composed of layered iron and steel, a rudimentary form of pattern welding which distributed stress more evenly along the blade. This was not for aesthetic effect alone. A layered blade resisted shattering under impact and allowed a relatively flexible spine with a hardened cutting edge. Survival on the battlefield often depended on the blade bending rather than breaking entirely, and this subtle engineering decision reflected an intimate understanding of material behavior. Once suitable metal was chosen, the smith began the repeated cycle of heating and hammering. Unlike modern industrial methods, medieval smithing relied entirely on observation and feel. The metal's color, its song when struck, indicated its temperature and readiness for shaping. Folding the metal, sometimes dozens of times, was not simply to create a decorative pattern. Each fold helped homogenize the carbon content, eliminate slag, and align the internal crystalline structure to resist fracture. This labor-intensive practice could take days for a single blade, with every hammer strike requiring precision. A misplaced blow could introduce a hidden fault that would render the sword unsafe in combat. Survival-minded warriors depended on this painstaking attention to detail. A poorly made sword could fail in the moment when strength and reflex mattered most. Forging shaped the sword, but hardening and tempering defined it. Quenching, a sudden immersion of the red-hot blade into water or oil, transformed the steel structure, creating a hard, sharp edge. Yet, if done too quickly or with inconsistent temperature, the blade could crack. Tempering followed to reduce brittleness, heating the blade to a precise degree before allowing it to cool slowly. Medieval smiths did not have thermometers. They relied on centuries of tradition, keen observation, and iterative testing. In many ways, this was the most dangerous phase of production. Each sword carried within it the cumulative knowledge of generations. A single error could destroy hours of labor and leave the buyer, often a knight or soldier, exposed to lethal risk in combat. Once the blade itself was forged, the sword was still incomplete. The hilt, guard and pommel were not mere decorations. They were integral to balance, maneuverability, and the soldier's survival. Medieval swords were, pretty heavy, and their weight distribution affected not only cutting power, but also endurance over long marches or repeated combat engagements. Smiths carefully carved wooden grips, bound them with leather, and affixed metal guards to protect the hand. Improperly balanced swords fatigued warriors quickly, compromised defensive techniques, and increased the chance of injury. Every aspect of construction reflected a practical understanding of human physiology in prolonged combat scenarios. The sword was, in effect, an extension of the body, and any deviation from precise craftsmanship had immediate consequences on survival. Before delivery, blades were often tested on wood leather or even old iron to observe their resilience. Cracks, bends, and microfractures could be detected through sound and observation alone. A sword that failed testing was either reforged or discarded. Longswords, arming swords, falchions, and estocks were not purely stylistic. Each form emerged in response to specific challenges. Longswords excelled in open-field combat but were heavy and, frankly, cumbersome in confined spaces. Falchions cut effectively against lightly armoured foes but could not penetrate chainmail reliably. Choices about blade length, width, and edge thickness were informed by the type of metal available, the skill of local smiths, and the expected opponents. Survival in battle was therefore not only a matter of personal bravery, but of understanding the tools at hand. Armies often adapted their tactics to the strengths and weaknesses of their weapons, showing a nuanced interplay between material science, human endurance, and, strategy. Studying the creation of swords provides more than a glimpse into craft. It illuminates survival in a broader sense. Each blade represented a careful negotiation of scarcity, skill, and time. Warriors and civilians alike depended on the quality of the smith's work for protection and sustenance. A battlefield could turn on the failure of a single edge, just as a village's ability to defend itself often relied on local craftsmen. In learning how swords were made, we learn about human decision-making under pressure, about the prioritization of durability over appearance, and about the incremental accumulation of knowledge that allowed societies to endure conflict over centuries. Medieval swords are often admired for their artistry, yet their true significance lies in what they reveal about human ingenuity, resilience, and practical problem-solving. They were not magical instruments, they were survival tools, honed through observation, experimentation, and risk. Appreciating the labor, intelligence, and subtle decision-making involved helps us see the past not as a collection of romantic myths, but as a series of human challenges overcome with patience, skill, and adaptation. Understanding these forgotten realities informs how we view conflict, craftsmanship, and preparation in any era. If you value in-depth historical analysis that goes beyond surface-level storytelling, consider subscribing and sharing this channel. Iron Age Instincts seeks to uncover the overlooked, the nuanced, and the instructive aspects of our past, so that the lessons of history remain practical and relevant.